Welcome to Catch Outdoors, presented by the Waypoint Podcast Network at waypointtv.com. I'm your host, Captain Rob Modes, your intrepid reporter from the Florida Keys. This week's episode is number 63, The River of Grass. Hello, everybody. On my website at catchoutdoors.com, I've added both my earlier books, once again for purchase with discounts for the holidays. The discounts also include shipping. These copies are signed. They're from the first edition printing and on high quality paper. I've also added a coming soon for the new book, Take a Kid Fishing, an adult's guide for introducing youngsters to the world of angling. Still patiently waiting. Waiting is the hardest part. Yeah, so said Tom Petty, one of my favorite artists. The powers that be, I got a note yesterday, let's see, I'm recording this on Monday, so that was Sunday, that the shipment is out and should be at my doorstep on Wednesday, so keep your fingers crossed. Anyhow, please check the website at catchoutdoors.com for any additional information. I've also made a concerted effort to bombard my Facebook page of Catch Outdoors with posts. Finally, mostly harmless, beautiful photos of the Keys and other outdoor areas that I have visited over there. I'm basically digging back into the archives and posting up some stuff that, I don't know, just pretty stuff, as well as some featurey kind of things that are happening around the Keys and other places that I have visited. So I'd really appreciate you take a look. Share it with your friends. If you're not already following Catch Outdoors on Facebook, please do that if you don't mind. It helps me a bunch to spread the word about the podcast and, of course, my books. The announcement that I did last week, one more time, Catch Outdoors will now run 40 to 45 minutes instead of 30. I started on that last week's podcast. I'm going with an extra 10 to 15 minutes to blabber, and it's all good. I found that I've been cutting myself off, quite frankly, or hurrying things up. Either way, not good. And I was also getting emails from listeners asking questions that I know should have been in the podcast. I'm like, wait a minute now, why didn't I mention that? So because I got rushed, that's why. So it's going to go a little long. So I hope you enjoy that. I'm doing my best to lose my voice. So if it cracks or goes weird on you, I'm sorry. I guess I did too much yelling yesterday during the Miami football game, which they, of course, lost. Well, not of course. They've been doing great until yesterday. But I yelled at them. And that's not good. Yes, I'm a Miami fan. Have been a long time, way back to the undefeated season. Even I'm old enough to remember that. So, weather here in Key Largo finally cooled off slightly. A front finally passed through. While it lowered the humidity, which I'm all for, it didn't really do much for the temperatures. Well, it did. I mean, we're getting mornings now that are 72, 74. And days that are 81, 82. So we've got definitely a different reach of weather. It's not into the 90s, and it's not at 80 at night. So it's much more. And the humidity has dropped tremendously. So let me explain something about the air temperatures here. We in the Keys are affected by the water that surrounds us. And so we can pretty much be guaranteed that we're not going to get the break that everybody else gets when a cold. It's got to be a monster cold front for us to actually feel a big difference. And it's got to have wind blowing directly out of the north. It's got to be coming off the land because there's so much water here. Now in Key Largo, I have a fairly small amount of water to the north of me. I have a huge amount to the south, to the north of the island. You have to understand now, Key Largo faces mostly east-west, so this might confuse some of you. So as you're coming down the Keys, most people picture the road as going down south toward Cuba. It doesn't. The road runs southwest at an angle, and Key Largo at the top is more east-west than anything else, quite frankly. The northern side of that has a few bays. We live across from Blackwater Sound, and there's a couple of other bays up there. There's a little lower Everglades. But the wind, if it's blowing due out of the north, we get land breeze, and land breezes are cooler. If we get a breeze from the east or the south, we get breezes right off of the Atlantic Ocean, which basically borders us on those sides, eastern side and the southern side of our island. And that wind that we get from that is basically blowing over the top of the Atlantic Ocean, which at this point right now is 79 degrees. So if you mix that with a little bit of cold air and you got wind blowing off the ocean, we get an average. So our low temperatures at night might be 73, 74 just because it's dark. And then when the daylight hits, it jumps right back up to 83, 84. So we don't get the break everybody else gets unless it's a monster cold front. And that will happen. I went back and looked historically just out of sheer curiosity and found that we had some fairly decent ones in January and at the very end of December. So right after Christmas, first part of January, and then maybe the first week of February, we might get an honest-to-God cold snap. But it ain't going to last long down here. That's the coolest part about it. And that's also why people like to fish here. I mean, quite frankly, our water does not get cold. We just don't have to deal with that. Water here will be consistently, even in the wintertime, 68 to 72 degrees. Right now, like I said, it's around 78 to 79 degrees. We've had a very extended summer here, a very extended summer. So, but that's why people like to fish here, because our fish are comfortable. As a matter of fact, most people here that I've talked to in Key Largo and down in Islamorada for that matter are just waiting for the first break. Fishing has been quite good, but it can be a whole lot better if we get a cold front in. It stirs that water up, it lowers the temperature, the fish get frisky, and the bite turns on. And so that's what many of us are waiting for right now. Now, normally at this point, I would give you a fishing report. There ain't one. Not from me. The wind blew and blew and blew, and it rained and rained and rained. And we had that for almost the entire week. The wind did not calm down until Saturday. No, that's not true. Blown on Saturday. Yesterday, Sunday, it started to calm down. Today was fairly nice. I had planned on going out, but I got wrapped up in doing Christmassy decorations on the house. And next thing you know, I'm like, well, I got to go do the podcast. That's due out tomorrow morning. I better get on that. So my fishing is going to be tomorrow. So, but don't worry, I'll make sure that I get a report out to you. I do know this, that the people that did fish were the big offshore boats, and they're out there starting to look for sailfish. For those that don't know this, the wintertime is the best thing for sails in the Keys, and off of Miami for that matter. They love rough water. They love choppy water. They love wind blowing on water. Of course, it would be even better if we had the cool off, which we haven't gotten yet. But the sailfish fishing is taken off. You need to have a high constitution as far as your stomach is concerned. The absolute best is going to be when you're out there in 5 to 8 foot seas, rocking and rolling, basically, trolling and sighting them, trying to find the things. And I can't say that they're not fun, because it is. But if you're subject to seasickness, I think you might want to find another sport. But anyway, I'm going to make it out there tomorrow, I hope. Look, the winds have finally laid down. It's looking really good. Water temperature, of course, like I said, is still up. There's a really decent tide. We're starting to come up on the full moon here. So I'm looking forward to it. And I will, now that the weather is finally cooperating, I'm going to get out there and hopefully more than once this past week. If it holds, I'll go fishing a couple of times and make sure I get you a really good inshore report via the kayak. So let's get to the meat of things. This week's subject, the river of grass. The term was coined by Marjorie Stoneman Douglas in 1947 in her book, The Everglades, The River of Grass. I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to start off by just reading an excerpt from the book. The Nature of the Everglades, Chapter 1, The Name. That's where this starts. There are no other Everglades in the world. They have always been one of the unique regions of the earth, remote, never wholly known. Nothing anywhere else is like them. Their vast, glittering openness, wider than the enormous visible round of the horizon. The racing, free saltness and sweetness of their massive winds under the dazzling blue heights of space. They are unique also in the simplicity, the diversity, the related harmony of the forms of life they enclose. The miracle of the light pours over the green and brown expanses of sawgrass and of water, shining and slowly moving below. The grass and water that is the meaning, the central fact of the Everglades of Florida. It is the river of grass. It's an amazing place, you all. It really is something to see. Basically, the Everglades is a 60-mile wide, very, very shallow river. It moves water from central Florida up there just below Orlando, and in that area, down through central Florida and south to the Florida Bay, and then eventually to the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic Ocean. The native Indians called it Pahaoki. Pahaoki. Translated means grassy water, which makes sense. Part of the reason I looked that up is there's a lot of mention on why in the world is it called Everglades. And I mean, the ever makes sense to me, no doubt about that, but Glades doesn't. Glades, I mean, I guess the European, the dictionary, European dictionaries and others refer to as glade as a grassy, like a beautiful, like a pasture, a great big grassy opening, usually on a hillside in the valley of mountains, things like that. So when you hear somebody say it's a glade, that's what they're talking about. The Everglades, while it is grass and it's beautiful, is not exactly what I would picture as a mossy green, beautiful, I'm going to lay down in it, because God knows you don't want to lay down in the Everglades, and you certainly don't want to lay down in sawgrass. So I don't know. So I had to go back and look it up. And in my search, I found that the Indians actually had a totally different name for it. And that's part of where Marjorie Stoneman Douglas pulled her River of Grass from in the title. Pahaoki, P-A-H-A-Y-O-K-E. Pahaoki. Translated means grassy water. So there you go. Its benefits were discovered almost too late. In the early days of development, the Everglades were dug up, rechanneled, dammed, blown up, dynamited, whatever else they could do to make more farmland and land for man to develop. And it turns out it was a pretty bad idea ecologically. As of right now, the majority of drinking water that almost everyone gets from the southern part of Florida, especially like the Miami-Dade, Broward County area south into the upper Florida Keys, is directly supplied by the Everglades. That's where our fresh water comes from. Our water table is dependent on it as well. And after all, we're sitting on a rock that's surrounded by salt water. So it's very, very important that water doesn't dry up or slow down. And that's what we were trying to do to it. I mean, man was just absolutely trying to contain it and to keep it from going anywhere. As a matter of fact, what they were really trying to do with most of it was just make it agricultural, just turn it into farmland. And those areas that did get turned are excellent farmland. You can't say they're not. The soil there is black because it's mostly the old muck of centuries and centuries of sawgrass and stuff, basically growing on top of each other, layer after layer after layer, as it dies off. It's like a self-fertilized area. So we get the most outrageous vegetables and things here, and especially, and you all that live up north, you're getting the benefit of that because a lot of your vegetables come from here in the wintertime, especially if you like a good tomato. Beans, green beans, things like that. So they did all this stuff. And then to top it off, they put two highways across. There's US 41, which is the older of the two, that ran across. And of course, that was considered a marvel of its time. It's referred to as the Tamiami Trail, which is exactly as it sounds. It's basically Tampa and Miami pushed together in one word, Tamiami. And that's what that road was. 41 was to get you from the Tampa area all the way down into Fort Myers, Naples, and then a hard left-hand turn right across the Everglades into Miami. That's what it was all about. And they basically did it by digging ditches on either side of where the road was going to be and piling the dirt up and then putting a road on top. There was very little access for water to go through. And then to top it off, they built State Road 84, which has later become Interstate 75. And that one, they did put some bridges in every few miles, and which helped. But they're working really hard now to change all that to make the water access better. As a matter of fact, 41, just so you know, huge sections of US 41 have been raised like a causeway to let the water flow more freely under it. And the reason for that is Florida Bay was starving. The Everglades were starving for water. It was evident as time went by over the last half a century, not quite that long, the last 30 years, I would say, that the Everglades were degrading, that things were not good. And it was really visible by those of us that fish in the Everglades, and especially south of the Glades in Florida Bay. It became pretty evident that the water quality of the bay was diminishing, that it just wasn't what it once was. I could get into all the sordid details, the politics, the lobbying. It would take an entire book. And I ain't writing that one. No way. I like my books to be a little bit more fun than that. But it really is. It was the powerful versus the non-powerful. It was the white man versus the Native Americans as it started. It was politicians who were insisting on development and building Florida and making it crazier and vacation land. And, you go back to Henry Flagler and all that bunch, building a railroad out to the Florida Keys, et cetera, et cetera. No one really gave a damn about the Everglades and didn't understand it. And number one, they couldn't conquer it. They had tried. That wasn't going to work. And if you ever go into the Everglades today, you'll completely understand why that was that was not going to work. But they tried, by gosh. And the thing that they really did, though, is they rechanneled water. And that was the dangerous thing for the Everglades itself and for the southern end of Florida, for that matter. They basically built canal systems. The Army Corps of Engineers channeled water that was coming down out of the I guess I'm going to call it the lower Orlando area, south of Orlando. The Kissimmee Valley that's the Kissimmee River and Kissimmee Valley and Lake Kissimmee, spelled Kissimmee. For those of you that have no idea, we know when you're not from here when you say I've been to Kissimmee, Florida. No, it's Kissimmee, but that's okay. The Indian pronunciations will get everybody that visits Florida. That's what makes it entertaining for us. But anyway. That water is traveling south, and then they basically canaled it. And there are zillions of these canals around. They're major ones, of course. Usually with a C for canal, it'll be C43, C45, C41, whatever the number of the canal is. And that canal is it creates a water path to steer water in a certain direction. Now, it was for drinking water and for irrigation. That's really what it was all about at first. But channeling that water away was something that no one ever thought would affect the Everglades. There was so much water in the Everglades. There was so much land in the Everglades that it was we'll just take a little bit of water. We'll just move a little bit of water over here. Well, that's not how it works. Because the Everglades water, the river grass, is so shallow, it's almost imperceptible in its movement. That's the crazy thing about it. You have to be sitting there in an airboat or in a shallow water, like a canoe or something, and watch the water rippling by you very slowly. So it's amazing that it's even moving. That kind of throws you the first time you see it, like, my gosh, that water really is moving. Well, that slowed down. And when it slowed down, it caused all kinds of problems. And again, we built a huge dike around Lake Okeechobee. Okeechobee was one of the main receivers of that water. And back in the day, a zillion years ago, Okeechobee was just a large hole in the ground. You have to understand the average depth of Okeechobee is not more than 3 or 4 feet deep. So it was just like a reservoir is really all it was. The water would come down from Kissimmee through the Kissimmee chain of lakes. It would wind up on the northern edges of Okeechobee. It would sit in Okeechobee, and then it would eventually release out or get high enough to where it would just continue on south. And that would run over literally into the Everglades from Okeechobee. Well, that all changed. And people moved in. And people went, wow, Florida, like me. Well, I was raised here, so that's only fair. But if I wasn't raised here, I would have probably found out a way to get here. The Everglades are, I've used this word before, magical, because they are. And it was just a shame. I've spent a great deal of time fishing in the Everglades. I've been all around it, and mostly in the waters. I'm not crazy enough to hike in the Everglades, although there are trails. I don't know, mosquitoes and spiders and alligators and bears, oh my. Mostly mosquitoes. That's the hard part. You do not want to come to the Everglades in the dead of summer. I'll warn you off on that one. I don't want to affect the Park Service's money or intake of travelers, but you need to be warned. You had better bring long pants, long sleeve shirt, a hat with a net that covers your face, and plenty of bug spray. Do that, and it's worth it. But if you don't, it's probably not. It's much better to travel there in the wintertime. All right, I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to do something just mid-thought, because that's how I am. That comes from doing so much live radio back in the day. I want to do this. I want to recommend a couple of books to you, because I've talked about the Everglades and the vastness of the Everglades and the wonder of South Florida and the wonder of how things in Florida work. But there's 2 really, really good books out there that I would highly recommend you invest in and read if you're interested in. And they're great reads, by the way. They're not boring, a lot of scientifically weird stuff, which I happen to enjoy myself. But this is much more of a flowing read, something that I think you would enjoy. The first one directly related to the Everglades is called The Swamp. The Everglades, Florida, and the Politics of Paradise is what it's called. It's by Michael Grunwald. It is excellent. That's all I can tell you. I have read all of it one time, and then I go back and pull excerpts out of it for myself just to review. It is without a doubt one of the most remarkable books about how the whole thing started. You know, what is the swamp about? What is the Everglades about? Who lived there and why? All about the Miccosukee Indians and the Seminoles and how they got involved in this area. The American Indian War, everything about it is fascinating. And then, of course, the politics and the politicians and when they showed up, what they did and how they literally tried to take it over and destroy it, which, of course, was not. Well, they just couldn't. Let's just put it that way. They tried, but they just couldn't. They couldn't. Nobody can defeat the swamp. I mean, that's my saying. I'm going to put that on a T-shirt. Nobody can defeat the swamp. You just can't. It's just an incredible place, and it's not going anywhere. And the people that tried to do it got themselves into serious trouble. And that's pretty much what this book is about. So grab The Swamp, The Everglades, Florida, and the Politics of Paradise by Michael Grunwald. Excellent read. The other one is called A Land Remembered. It's by Patrick D. Smith. And it is a historical novel of epic proportion. It basically covers a family is what it does. It's really interesting. I've read its 500 pages at least 3 times through. Because it covers, it's a historical novel, so it's a made up family basically, the McIvy family, and there's 3 generations of it in the book, and it's all about. They start out as like just dirt farmers, dirt poor too, herding up free range cattle out of Central Florida and running it down to literally to Fort Myers, Florida, to put it on barges to send it down to Cuba, and it's utterly fascinating how the times changed and how things went from just being a free-range person, a pioneer of Florida with no boundaries, no land boundaries, whatever, to slowly getting boundaries and working your whole family through this over 3 generations. And it does cover an awful lot of the early politics of Florida and how it all worked, how it evolved into literally what it is today. So I'd recommend grabbing that one, A Land Remembered by Patrick D. Smith. So there you go. Now you got your reading assignments. Oh, and the other book, of course, The Everglades, River Grass by Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. You got just, if you sit down over the summer, this is winter. I'm sorry, it feels like summer here. It does. I'm not rubbing it in, but it does. Well, maybe I rubbed it in a little bit. Those 3 books over the winter would be great reads. If you are stuck in the house and it's snowing and it's blowing and you got the fire in the fireplace and there's nothing going on, and those 3 books, that's all you need right there. It'll make you feel like you're in Florida at least. At least when you read it, you'll feel like you're a part of Florida. So that's a good thing, I guess. Okay, so why all this stuff about the Everglades? Well, it's where my heart is in South Florida. I mean, I absolutely love Florida. I have not spent a lot of time in upper central Florida. I have gone to many of the springs and done that kind of stuff. And I fished out of Homosassa. I fished out of the Panhandle. I fished out of Jacksonville. So I've been all around Florida. But my love is the southern end of Florida, a line that you just draw across from Fort Myers and just go straight across to Fort Lauderdale, right across the Lake Okeechobee. And I spent a great deal of time fishing in these waters, and especially the waters off of Naples south into the 10,000 Islands, which quite technically is the Everglades National Park. As a matter of fact, Collier County has the only western entrance into the park. When you get down into Everglades City / Chokoloskee down in that area, there is a Everglades National Park entry there. Of course, you're not really going into land Everglades at that point. You're basically going into the water, but it is certainly worth it. And as a matter of fact, I understood that there's some work being done there to freshen it up, basically new building, taking care of things. All this area was kind of devastated by a series of hurricanes ever since, all the way back to Hurricane Charlie, which was in 2004. And besides that, in funding, there was a lot of problems in the National Park Service getting stuff done. So, but that's happening. So you should know that if you're a West Coaster, you have access to the Everglades, mostly water, but you have access to it. And that's important because it is truly a wilderness. It is a place you can go and not be around anybody else. But also there was an ulterior motive about the Everglades thing. I knew that the upcoming anniversary of the Everglades was coming, the 75th anniversary of the Everglades National Park was going to happen on Saturday, last Saturday. And I was there with my wife, Janelle. We had made up our minds. I know work-wise, she had to go do it. And in my case, she's like, do you want to go along? And I'm like, heck yeah, I want to go along. So we actually spent time in the Everglades National Park on Saturday and really, really enjoyed what we saw, what we witnessed. So let's talk about this. 75th anniversary celebration, Everglades National Park, 75 years old, but still brand new. I love the slogan. That's excellent. They also put the excerpt I read to you from the book is at the very beginning of the program that we were handed. Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, by the way, wrote that book in November 6, 1947. That's the published date. On December 6, 1947, Everglades National Park was dedicated. So very, very timely. Of course, thanks very much to Harry S. Truman, President Harry S. Truman, who he was truly an outdoorsman, and he loved the great outdoors, things, as far west as Yellowstone and all the beautiful, beautiful things out west. But he was the one that really discovered he certainly didn't discover it, but you know what I mean? He found the Everglades and he did what a lot of us did. And he just said, this is an awesome area. This is an incredible thing. We must save this. We can't let this be developed. And you got to really put the whole load right on top of him for doing what he did. We had a wonderful time. They had reenactment actors there, which I thought was pretty cool. Grant Livingston was there. He's a singer-songwriter who writes an awful lot of really great songs about the glades, water, basically just living in that area and what it's like. Ron McGill was the master of ceremonies. If you don't know who that is, he is one of the best of the Goodwill ambassadors from Zoo Miami. What an incredible character and a lot of fun he was. But we had, just an abundance of people showed up. Secretaries, mayors, House of Representative folks, things like that. All of them trying to get their obviously pat themselves on the back, and I can't say I blame them for that. But what really took me was the coming together of all these people for this event. Years ago, everybody was at odds with each other. You could not, Republican, Democrat, Independent, didn't make any difference. Everybody hated each other. Everybody thought everybody's doing the wrong thing. You got to save this. You got to do that. No, you can't. You have to let people in. People need access to a park like this and area. There's this constant bickering. Then you had both of the Indian tribes. You had the Miccosukee and the Seminoles. And they were not happy about the white man, and understandably so. These people made this place their home for centuries. It was like, guys, you're wrecking our home. But for some reason, somehow, and I cannot put my finger on it, but I've been around to watch it happen, everything kind of came together. And everyone started to realize that if we don't all do something about this, we're going to lose it. That's all there is to it. It's just going to disappear, and that's going to be the end of it. And we were letting things happen that should not be happening. We were letting people move in. I mean, I have a real beef with Big Sugar. I have a real problem with Big Sugar. Always have, always will. It just, if you've ever seen them when they burn the sugarcane fields, I guess that's in the fall. I can't remember now if it's spring or fall. I think it's springtime, actually. They grow the sugarcane, then they cut the cane, and then they burn the fields. Smoke everywhere. Pitch black smoke. It's horrible. I don't know. It's a dirty sport. That's what I'll call it. It's a dirty sport. Yes, I eat sugar. We all do. It's in every bit of food you eat. And yes, it probably came from that area. I love candy. I admit it. I love pies and cakes. I admit it. I love ice cream. I admit it. But we have really got to work harder on finding out where our sugar comes from and how it's processed. And it has really caused an awful lot of problems in the Everglades ecosystem. all in all, it's just one of those things that if you live around here and you've been around it long enough, you start to witness and see things. Now, remember, I'm an old fart. I just turned 69, so I've had a while to watch this. And back in my 30s and 40s, I wasn't overly concerned about it. I mean, I knew it was there, but we weren't having any serious water quality problems. We had a few, but it was nothing major. And then we started to get the major red tides on the West Coast, which I had to fish in. So let me tell you, I knew all about that crap. And as time went on, it got worse. And as time went on, the water channeling got worse. And the Army Corps was dumping water on either coast. They damn near killed Indian River Lagoon. So the battle continues. But with this coming together, and, the big chief from the Army Corps of Engineers was there. The tribes were there. The Seminole Indians and the Miccosukes. It was remarkable. Democrats, Republicans, they were all there, and they were all talking about this dastardly deed that everyone had done and how we're going to fix it. Ron DeSantis, who we're big fans of here in Florida. I know a lot of people outside Florida, we don't like, you don't know Ron DeSantis, obviously. That's okay. I'm not going to get into a political battle with that. But he's drummed up over $3 billion for water. And that's a lot of money. And some of this reconstruction work has already started, and some of it has already completed. So this redirection of water, getting it underneath US 41, the reservoir areas where water gets to sit and process the chemicals out from the sugar and sugar cane before it winds up in the Everglades. A lot of that work has been done, and there's money. He's really figured out how to get money to pour into this. But he's an outdoorsman. I mean, most people don't realize that Ron DeSantis loves the outdoors almost as much as we do. He likes to fish and carry on. So he has his eye on that. And there are a lot of other people that will surprise you. There are a lot of other Democrats, of course, that are doing the same thing, beating the drum and making sure this gets done. So I'm happy to report that after sitting there at the 75th anniversary, I really had a much better feel for things and what was going on. Probably the neatest person I met was the superintendent, Pedro Ramos. He is the new superintendent of the parks, of Everglades National Park. And what a guy. He is a fire plug is the only way I can put it. He's very excited about the park. He's very excited about the opportunities of the park. He's Hispanic, and that tells you that things are changing, that things are really working in a different direction in the park. It was also fun to talk to some of the other people that were there. A big surprise for me was Chauncey Goss. I got to speak to him for a few minutes. Chauncey is board chairman, South Florida Water Management, a person that a lot of people are at odds with, and he's at odds with the Army Corps, and there's this big battle going on. But it was fun talking to him for a few minutes, and then I really was stunned when one of my friends showed up on the stage and spoke, Captain Chris Whitman. He's the co-founder of Captains for Clean Water. And Chris and I go back a ways. We go back a long ways. We met each other on the docks at Punta Rasa when I first became a guide, and he was driving the Hooters boat. He was sponsored by Hooters, and he was running all the tournaments and stuff, and we had a lot of great conversations and things. But back, just 6 years ago now, 6 or 7, close to 6 years ago, he stopped guiding and formed Captains for Clean Water. And it was, to him, it was, I've talked to him about this. It was really tough. He wanted to be a part of it. That was when red tides were taken off. He like many other guides over there, realized that something wasn't right, and it was time to fix it. And I got involved with them. Give them my money. I wear their hat. I put the bumper sticker on the car. At first, it was kind of laughed at. At first, people looked at it and said, what are you doing? This is never going to work. Well, it did. It was a grassroots effort. Those boys drove up and down the road to Tallahassee over and over again. Got some legislation done to help turn the water away from Lee County and away from the Indian River Lagoon, so that huge washes of Lake Okeechobee full of fertilizer was not going in either direction. They made arrangements to have some of the monies that were raised spent on getting that water to move south toward the Everglades where it belongs. Of course, part of that problem was making sure the water's clean when it got there. Part of the biggest problem we had is Okeechobee is agricultural. So people are using chemicals for agriculture, and it winds up in the lake. And as a whole, the lake is fairly good. The lake, big bass are caught there. Everything's fine. But when you let that water out, you wind up with all kinds of blooms and things that shouldn't be there because of the fertilizers that are in the water. So that's what was happening. Well, Captains for Clean Water helped work that out. So anyway, it was a nice surprise to see Chris up there. And Chris said to me, he was surprised he was invited because everyone else was like this hoity-toity politician type person. There was Chris right in the middle of it, but he was used to it. I mean, that's what he does. So on that note, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor because of my love for the Everglades. I really want to get this across. Get involved. If you're a Floridian and you're living here, or if you're a Northerner, what we lovingly call Yankees, and we mean that in a good way. You can call us crackers. It's okay. We don't mind. When you come down here and you live here, you need to be a part of it, and you don't need to be a part of the problem. Stop using fertilizers on your yard. Don't water your yards constantly. You don't need to have beautiful green grass. I grew up on scrub. I grew up on shell. Oh, God, I could tell you, man, being barefoot kid in Florida is tough. That's all there is to it. It'll toughen you up. But you really need to be more concerned about like native plants and native gardening and things like that so that you're not using all this water to make your yard beautiful and green. You need to be a part of this and not an outsider looking in. Captains for Clean Water, I mentioned them just a minute ago. Join. Find out about them. Look them up on the web. See what they're all about and what they're up to. They need help. They need money. They still are lobbying for all these things that we're hopeful for, and they have done a great job so far, and I feel pretty sure they'll keep doing it. I know Chris isn't going to stop. So it's important that you go there. The Nature Conservancy, check that one out. That is a freshwater advocacy group. Really good. They do a lot of research and spend an awful lot of time finding out what it takes to get fresh water where it belongs. And that's been a big problem. I know it sounds crazy because it rains here a lot in the summer. You'd be surprised how much water does not reach the Everglades. It goes somewhere else, and that's where these big changes are coming from. The Bonefish Tarpon Trust, I'm pretty fond of these guys. I've been a member of them for a very long time, and that's because I fished and fish for a living for a long while. They were doing research ultimately on tarpon. That was, or at first really on tarpon, and the migration patterns of tarpon, because nobody knew how they spawned or where. Nobody had any idea. And here you had a fish who's literally prehistoric. It's been around since the dinosaurs, but most people did not understand. And what they were worried about is what they always worry about in fishing is overfishing. Are we killing too many fish? Are we messing with too many fish? Should we be leaving them alone during a certain time of the year or in a certain place? That's the research they do. That blew over into bonefish, which was a migratory schooling fish that is found primarily here in the Keys, down into the Caribbean, and over in the Bahamas. And they were worried about the numbers on those fish too. Some people basically were killing bonefish to put the fish into traps to attract crabs and stuff. But they were using it for bait because it's not a very good fish to eat. So they've done research on that as well. So check out Bonefish Tarpon Trust. I'm pretty fond of them, and they spend the money well. Let's put it that way. Live Wildly. I just discovered this. This is brand new. This is corridor info about Central core of Florida and how important it is to both water and animals of Florida. So what Live Wildly, so this is Live Wildly. You can find them on Facebook. That's the easiest place to locate them. They talk about the central core of Florida that runs all the way down the middle of Florida, from the freshwater areas that I was speaking about earlier, the beautiful springs and stuff like that, all the way down into the Everglades down the middle, not the East Coast, not the West Coast, and how important that core is, because developers are looking at that core in a big way right now. They're talking about running a highway, like an interstate highway up the middle of Florida to take the pressure off 95 and 75. And we're all going, I don't think that's a good idea, but maybe a small state road, but an interstate, I'm not so sure about that. So check out that one. That's a good one. Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary Foundation. I have got to be a big fan of that because guess what? I live on it. I live next door to it. The Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary Foundation is part of the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary, of which controls everything you see basically on the outside of the Florida Keys, on the ocean side. Of course, they do inside stuff too, but a great deal of that is actually the Everglades National Park. I don't know if many people realize that. If you go down to Islamorada here in Key Largo, down not quite to Marathon, but definitely all of Islamorada. If you go north out of Islamorada and head toward the tip of Florida, within a mile or less, you're in the Everglades National Park. It's like just boom, you're there. The border comes way, way down into Florida Bay. So anyway, on the other side, the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary is basically, it encompasses like Pinnicamp State Park and those areas, all those beautiful coral reefs that are out there, alligator life, molasses reef, those areas. Those are all inside of the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary. I'm a big supporter of it. I use a kayak in it. I should be a big supporter. I love making sure that I've got my state park passes purchased every year. Anytime a donation type thing comes up, I'm all for it. So be sure to check that out. If you really enjoy the waters of the Atlantic Ocean off of Florida, and especially if you've been snorkeling on or diving on some of the beautiful wrecks out there in the coral reefs, then you have most likely been diving in the National Marine Sanctuary. There are many, many others. You can find them by just simply going to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Type in Everglades, type in water management, type in water quality, Florida water, things like that, and you'll find others. Be careful. There are some that are there to make money and not spend the money. I hate to say that, but you know how the world is. So do your research and stuff before you get involved in one and find out about it. The ones I've mentioned, I will give credit for because I've been involved with them in one way or another. But there are many, many others. And of course, as this quality has become front and center, more and more are appearing. Never been to the Everglades? You should go. You should absolutely go. You got to put it on your adventure calendar. We are so lucky that it's part of Florida, and it needs to be explored. It's funny how many people have driven across I-75 and really don't realize the breadth of the Everglades National Park. It encompasses an area near I-75. Part of it, the Big Cypress National Preserve, which is on either side of US 41, moves up toward I-75. You have the Shark River Slough down this way, the heart of Everglades National Park. Taylor Slough. Oh my God, I took a picture the other day. If you go to Catch Outdoors and just flip it on, one of the latest posts I did is just a quick photograph I took outside, standing outside the Jeep, just looking at it, an eternity of land. It's mind-blowing. It's absolutely mind-blowing. You get down, you have Florida Bay is all part of it. A great deal of the 10,000 islands are in the Everglades National Park. These are all open to fishermen and travel and things like that. You got to get a park pass. You'll have to get a pass now to go into those areas, but I think it's worth it. But anyway, if you've never been, you need to see it. Now, I've talked to many, many people that have been, I went to Yellowstone and I've been out west, and I'm thinking, okay, cool. Did you go to Everglades? No, you should, because it's just as breathtaking as those other locations are. Hopefully next week I'll have a fishing report for you. I'm anxious to get on the water tomorrow. I will let you know what happens. Other than that, have yourself a really good week. And thank you so much for taking the time to tune in. My podcasts are scheduled each and every Tuesday. If you enjoyed listening, please tell a friend, leave a review, subscribe to the channel. Catch Outdoors is presented by the Waypoint Podcast Network. Is available on Waypoint and many of your favorite podcast providers. The Facebook page is Catch Outdoors. The website, waypointtv.com and catchoutdoors.com. Until next time, get outdoors and enjoy.